Russia's invasion of Ukraine inspired Finland and Sweden to forego decades of military neutrality and apply for NATO membership. Now, both nations, of course, have significant fighting forces. CNN's Nina Dos Santos shows us what Sweden has to offer the Western alliance. Have a look at this.
Sweden's armed forces holding joint exercises with Finland days after the countries applied to join NATO. These drills were planned 2 years ago, but have taken on a new urgency since Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The opponent have shown very clearly that the threshold to use their military means to reach their aims and goals have lowered. We don't exclude anything today.
With well-funded defences, both countries bring a lot to the table. Sweden in particular, with its own homemade high-tech hardware, originally set up to support the nation's neutrality.
So basically it's the fighter jets and then the submarines.
Yeah. I think Sweden has 4 main contributions. The first one being geography. NATO cannot fulfill Article 5 scenario in the Baltics without using Swedish territory. Secondly is the Swedish Air Force, with the third one being deep intelligence cooperation, and the fourth one being the submarine force.
If part of NATO, Sweden's submarines and fighter jets could play a greater role in protecting Scandinavia and the Baltic Sea.
Without an air defense, it will be very difficult for the Army and the Navy to conduct their operations. We are a strong air force with 100 fighters. We will add strength to the NATO.
The jewel in its crown, the Gripen JAS 39, made by Saab.
What's it feel like?
Being in this aircraft is like being inside a rocket. You fly a thing like this in that speed. It's absolutely amazing. Using our avionics system is a completely new way of managing information. All these sensors give you lots of information.
I have been given the chance to take a look inside the cockpit. And what I can tell you is that you're immediately struck by the sheer amount of technology that's been packed into a very tight space.
Already used by NATO members Hungary and the Czech Republic, these sophisticated craft have earned Sweden, home to just over 10 million people, a place among the top-ranked air forces.
These Swedish jets are also designed to be able to take off and land from very short runways. For instance, here they've been practicing on a local highway. They also only need a limited number of personnel to refuel and rearm them, and that can be done within 10 to 12 minutes.
If you have 1 or 2 air bases, those will be targets immediately. If you have that capability that you can use highways and hide the aircrafts and the operations, you become sort of much less a target.
Sweden's bid for NATO membership may have hit some unexpected turbulence, but having these capabilities could, in the end, help to win critics over.
We bring knowledge and experience from this region. We live here, we exercise here, we are prepared to fight here.
Nina Dos Santos, CNN, in Thun, Sweden.
Here at the World Economic Forum, the war in Ukraine, as Richard was saying, front and centre, with a dramatically altered security landscape just among many of the consequences. Russia went into Ukraine hoping to stop the expansion of NATO. Instead, its aggression triggered membership bids from both Sweden and Finland. And joining us now is Mikael Damberg. He's Sweden's finance minister. Minister, fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. There's too much to discuss, but we'll begin talking about NATO because this is very important. And of course, there were discussions over the weekend. Turkey, who's seemingly standing in the way of your future membership, and Finland's, laying out their conditions. Can those conditions be met? Should they be met?
I think from a perspective, we have now for 200 years been a non-aligned country. We had discussions with all NATO membership countries before our application, and now Turkey says that they have some remarks on positions. So of course,
the position changed.
Yes, their position changed.
Yes.
So now we'll have to have a dialogue, and also our Prime Minister has had a talk with Erdogan, and both bilaterally and together with Finland and together with NATO, because we see that many of the NATO membership countries actually want Finland and Sweden joining NATO in our strategic position in Northern Europe, but also with our military capacities. So of course, this has to be handled.
Can they be convinced?
No, I think I shouldn't speculate because I understand that Turkey in some other cases have had raised questions and sometimes they have been solved. So we're working very constructively together with them, having dialogue. But of course, this is a bigger question that not only involves Sweden, Finland and Turkey. It involves the whole of NATO.
It does. You have the luxury, or at least the foresight, of not having the same strategic level of reliance in terms of energy on Russia, but your country feeling the consequences like many others, whether it's food price rises, whether it's energy price rises. What do you make of what we're seeing? Because there's multifold crises that we're discussing here in Davos and the whole world's having to grapple with and decide how best to respond. It's not easy, particularly when you have elections coming up.
Yeah. Of course, we see an effect on our growth, not as high as we expected before the war, but still a stable growth. We see higher prices, but we also see the long-term perspective that Europe really has to unlock our dependence on Russian oil and gas. So this must be the time where we actually step up and do more of the green transition. And what we see in Sweden, in our perspective, that's really creating jobs in Sweden now. We have huge investments in the green industries in Sweden. So we see the possibilities also inside a crisis.
Do you think other nations get that?
No, I think many countries don't see the possibility to actually have economic growth and job creation and green transition on the same time. But Sweden and some other Nordic countries actually are the example that shows it's possible. Now we have huge investments in northern part of Sweden, in steel industries, in the battery industry, the car industry, the renewable energy side. So this really creates tens of thousands of jobs in our Rust Belt, in our part of society where the development has gone the wrong way in decades, now actually sees new jobs and lower unemployment.
Do you worry about the risk of global recession?
Of course, we see that as a possible threat.
But not an inevitability.
Not inevitability. It's how we handle a crisis. And also, it depends on what Russia do in Ukraine. Of course, that could set up even a bigger fire in the global economy.
And if we look at the situation today, you've played down the risk of some form of retaliation from Russia, and as you began at the beginning of this conversation, we'll see what happens with Turkey in the NATO situation. But, you know, there's a dual war going on here. There's a sort of cyber security risk war, and that's playing into democracies, into societies. How prepared are you? Because that also has to be a piece of the defence budget spending that you're focused on, and it's sort of an underrepresented, reported risk, I think, at this moment too. Are you prepared for that?
I think Sweden is a digital frontrunner. We have the Ericsson, the 5G, we have the gaming companies, we have the banks being very digitalized.
And it's
yes, so that's my point. That's my point. So very far ahead in digitalization, and that brings also risks and insecurities. So for us, we're aiming at this, pointing at this, and we have to raise awareness, but we also have to gather all the competences in a cybersecurity center that has been inspired what they've done in London and Great Britain. So and we try to have an international cooperation. It's not only Sweden. It's a European issue. It's also linked with our American partners. So we try to work very close to them as well.